I've been dreading making this video for a little over a year now, and I didn't really know how to start it. So I just sat down and pressed record. I think about the happiest time in my life, and it was making this show. For those who don't know, this is the Hijinks podcast. This was a concept I came up with, I want to say, earliest concept was 2019. I think I recorded the first episode in 2020, maybe 2021. And the last season ended, I want to say, in 2022. And it was just a platform where I could bring one of my friends on and we have an open and honest conversation about a one word topic. We would talk for an hour before the episode, which would lead us into the episode, just exploring the facets of any given word. I think my favorite episodes would probably be Life with my friend Braden and Family with my cousin Juan. I think Time was a good episode, Space was a good episode, Happiness was a good episode. For those who don't know, my name's Nathan McBride. At the time of this recording, I'm 25, living in St. Louis, pronouns he, they, and it is Tuesday, August 19th. In 10 days, I will be 26, and I have not recorded an episode in a very long time. And it's something I love to do, which normally I have a guest on, but this is the first episode I've done a video of. So it's just going to be me. In honor of what's come before me, my topic is going to be fate. I wonder if I believe in fate. I definitely feel like this last, I want to say 5 years, has pushed and pulled and shaped me in ways that I never would have imagined. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to give you guys, I guess, a more in depth view on who I am, where I'm from, what this is, what to expect, all the good stuff. But I guess I'll start from the beginning. As forementioned, Nate McBride. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, to an amazing woman. And early on, it was just us. I grew up in Moline Acres and moved to U City when my mom and now dad, but stepdad, got married and started this huge ass family that I'm a part of. I have, if you know, I have a huge family. I want to say three sides. Some from Tennessee, some from here, mostly from here, some from Alabama, a lot of East Coast folk. But I'm outside. I always like, if you go back and listen to some of these videos, I try to do a different location for every episode so you can hear crickets in the background of some of these. It's a vibe. I am my biological father's oldest of three, and my mom's no, I'm my biological father's youngest of three, and my mom's oldest of three. I have three older brothers, a little sister, and a younger brother. And I'm blessed to be as close as I am with all of them. I've done just about every schooling you can think of. Public school from second grade to fifth grade. I went to a really, really cushy Jewish private school for sixth and seventh grade. Like organic lunches, everybody had laptops, the whole nine. I think there was like trips to Europe if you could afford it. But even before that, I went to Lutheran school for kindergarten and first grade. For some reason, I was the only kindergartner, so it would be like all of the, I guess, preschoolers, and then I was the only kid in kindergarten, so they just lumped me with them. So in kindergarten, I was the only first grader, but left there, went to U City for second to fifth. Shouts out to Jackson Park. From there, went to Churchill Center in school, and from there went back to Olive for Emmanuel Lutheran Olivet, which is funny because I only went there for eighth grade, but to this day, I can still say hi to those teachers and some students, and they still know me, know my family, because all of that was like, I think K through eighth. So my brother and sister went. It was a big like Lutheran family school. From there, I went to Lutheran North for high school, all 4 years, and that was an interesting time because I didn't really like it. But who really likes high school? Funny enough, I think I had more fun hating high school than like actively participating in it. I think I was always very countercultural. So, didn't really do the in groups, didn't really do, I guess, the Lutheran agenda, and there was a lot of that. But I made a lot of good friends from eighth grade, for one, because one of them went to high school with me. But definitely in high school, I feel like I was always pretty like moderately sheltered growing up, whether that be lack of my ambition or my parents' neuroticism, for real, for real. But I was a big homebody. I like building Legos, watching VHS tapes, eating pizza. Pizza tattoo. I don't know if you could hear that because the mic was far, but I got a pizza tattoo. Pretty recent development. But from Lutheran North, I went to Flow Valley for 2 years. Not really doing anything. I was already working at the time. Started working 2016, graduated 2017. So I paid for my own classes and didn't really like it. didn't really like school at that point. I was definitely burnt out from my high school experience, so college just seemed like more bullshit that I didn't really want to do. I was always very headstrong and still am, so it's very hard getting me to do things that I don't want to do. But dropped out of college in 2019. Like, sat down at the dinner table with my parents, like, hey, I don't want to do this shit. So, started working full time. I had two jobs. One at the St. Louis Zoo, worked there since 2016. Stopped working there, I want to say mid 2024. No, I'm like the end of 2023. I think 2023 was like last full year. I've taken breaks here and there before, but I worked there for a long time. And I also worked at Top Golf. I started Top Golf and I want to say 20 I want to say early 2019, like January. And I was working two jobs. Still hanging out at Flow Valley because I had a lot of friends there at that point. But made even more friends at Top Golf. At the zoo, I worked in like a catering department. I don't know how heavy I want to get with these details because motherfuckers live here. But I worked in the catering department. Everybody was at least 4 years older than me. So it was weird going to Top Golf and working with people my age and sometimes younger. So I had a ball. It was actually really fucking awesome. But I got fired from Top Golf. I want to say 2020, like right before my birthday. So like June of 2020. So like in the middle of the pandemic, if you observe, I was out in Chesterfield, so they didn't do any sort of COVID precautions for real, for real. We were out kicking it. I had a fake ID. I was wildin', but it was a good time. And even leaving, funny enough, the friends that I truly made didn't leave. And I think we're all still friends to this day, like regardless of Top Golf. So that was such a comforting experience, knowing that these relationships weren't just dependent on the environment, but real. From Top Golf, I hopped around a little bit, still worked at the zoo, worked in a warehouse for a little bit, walked out at the warehouse, and I feel like the warehouse kind of brought me to where I was at. Over the pandemic, I was on unemployment because we were furloughed at Top Golf. So I had a bit of money saved. So I think I just didn't work for a while and recorded a good chunk of season one of this podcast. But from there, I ended up working next door to Top Golf at the main event that just opened up because it was a similar environment. It was pretty much more of the same, but I had been hardened by my experience leaving Top Golf. So I felt like it was work that I could manage and work that I didn't fall out of love with just yet. So I thought it'd be a pretty easy transition. But if you know anything about food service and hospitality, there's an expiration date. And my last night at Main Event, I had reached it. I was one of 8 servers when I started that job. And by the time I left, I was one of 4. And on the night I left, I had both dining rooms all by myself for 5 hours. Pretty sure it was a Friday. So imagine any restaurant on a Friday during a dinner rush. And it was just me. And funny enough, 3 of my tables offered me a job just because they saw how I was busting my ass at this job. And I took a chance on one of them. And that brought me to St. Charles, funny enough. I'm gonna adjust the camera right here. I'm not really gonna edit this bitch either. Sue me. But yeah. 4 months after Main Event. So I left Main Event and had this new job driving around special needs and elderly folk in St. Charles. Pay was actually terrible, but the job itself was one of the most fulfilling things I had ever done up to this point, and I really loved it. But I was kind of going through a lot in my personal life, so ultimately, finances became a lot bigger of a thing. I blew through my pandemic savings because Joe Biden, I think, I'm pretty sure Obama put it into action. But with the unemployment, if you borrowed under $10,000, you didn't have to pay it back. So I got right under $10,000 and didn't have to pay it back, but blew all that. Can't even lie. I was smoking a ton, drinking enough, going out, having fun, enjoying my relative youth at the time. And come to my parents hearing that WashU, or Washington University, for those who don't know, was hiring in their library. So I work at that library from early 2022 to early 2024, roughly. It was around my 2 year mark. But I started, I want to say either March or May of that year. But that was definitely one of my least favorite working experiences. Ultimately, because the hospitality industry, like, I think we can be real about this. There's an allure to it. There's a drug to it. It's fast paced. The money can be really good. The environment's always pretty fun. And the camaraderie. A lot of people stay at their restaurant or with their crew because of the people. It's usually not the pay. It's usually not the establishment itself or even the management, but it's your coworkers. And this was the first time I was like really alone in my working environment. And I feel like between that and going through what I was going through in my personal life, this was definitely like one of my worst working experiences. So I worked in Olin Library as their mail carrier. And these were a bunch of liberal, introverted, I don't want to say Ivies because we're very far from the Ivies, but definitely like well educated folks. And I'm this college dropout, stoner, 6'3" black man who's just trying to see who's grabbing drinks after work. Wasn't really here for the academia, wasn't really here for any of that highbrow bullshit, for lack of a better word. And I had some fun at the job. There were definitely like some nice freebies. While she loves to talk about their great benefits, but nobody in my position had the freedom to use those benefits. My goal originally was to work my year and go back to college. I feel like I had lived enough life. I feel like I was ready to actually lock in, get out of the hospitality industry, and like figure out what field I wanted to be in. And my year went up. I went to HR to find out about the tuition benefit. The benefit was ass. If I had started school that year, it would have been 8 years before I got my undergrad. And I knew after my first year I wasn't going to work at WashU 8 years. I didn't like the environment, didn't like the people I worked for, and not even the people I worked for because they were at least decent human beings, but the people I was around, my so-called colleagues, I didn't like mm, I don't know, the sense of detachment everybody felt, not only to the place but to each other. It was a very weird vibe. It's like introverted liberal librarians, you know, what did you expect? But this was around my last 2 months, and I had decided I was going to leave. I didn't know how I was going to leave, but I knew I was going to leave. I think I'm going to stop right here to go on a little side tangent. In 2019, two of my grandmothers, my stepdad's mom and my mom's mom, started showing signs of dementia, at least as I could recall. Funny enough, I got my license in 2019, so my mom's mom and I spent a lot of time together because she used to drive me around when other family members couldn't. She's a small business owner in the St. Louis area, so I'm debating on how much I'm going to edit this. I'm probably going to put some shit in there, so I'm going to flash the building. But she's owned a bar for over 40 years, and it was like almost the family's like guiding force. I felt like, and not in a controlling way or dominating way, but I felt like the family revolved around this gathering place. I felt like this was where the community convened. And growing up, I always had this big sense of family, of community, because there would be the patrons at the bar. My grandmother owned the bar. My mom and dad would work at the bar, along with my aunt, my uncles, family friends. One of my bosses at WashU also would work at the bar, so I've known him my entire life. But in 2019, she started showing signs, along with my dad's mom, stepdad's mom, for context. And during the pandemic, my mom's mom lived with us. My mom's mom was a gangster. No other way to pull it. Weed smoking, gun toting, mouth like a sailor, heart of gold. Like just one of my best friends. Super well read, super well spoken, super cultured. Put me on to so much life. And even like got me into thinking politically. Every time she picked me up, she was listening to NPR, which is where my mom started listening to NPR. But Granny was hip. Like Granny went from NPR to satellite radio. She was listening to Sirius XM, that exclusive shit. And I'll never forget during the pandemic when I go into her room and she said, put something on TV. I turn on CNN because she's the reason I know what channel CNN's on. And she said, turn that shit off. And that's just not who she was as a person. So I knew she wasn't the same person. Fast forward a little bit. It's April 2021. I've been cooped up with the pandemic until I got unfurloughed at Top Golf. Fired from Top Golf, working in warehouses, still had some of my pandemic money left. I wanted to leave St. Louis. I wanted to get the hell out. Didn't want to be here anymore. So, talked to my folks. My mom has siblings, so one of my aunts lives in Washington, D.C. And I wanted to go visit her because I haven't really been to Washington, D.C. since I was 13 at that time. Fun fact, I was at Obama's first inauguration in '08 and got separated from my mom. I was with some aunts and uncles and that grandmother, as aforementioned. So that was my Home Alone experience. My Game Boy Advance didn't have enough batteries, so it was not a pleasant time. But Obama's a fucking war criminal, so yeah, fuck him. But yeah, 2021 April, I go to Washington D.C. I have a cousin who's around my age out there, along with my aunt. So I thought it was going to be a super fun time. I was going to connect with family, try some new food, have have a good time. I was 20, still had my fake ID, so it's like I'd been 21 for 2 years at this point. For the audio listeners, I'm vaping. It's one of the few vices I have left. I'll get into that even further down the line. Another side tangent. Promise I'm keeping all of this on track. I'm ADHD, so my brain works a little differently, but it's all going to make sense. My biological dad and my mom split when I was 1 or 2, very early on. I want to say around 1, maybe not even then, because I remember my second birthday. My aunt pulled up with a fat Emo's pizza. I want to say shout out to Emo's, but due to capitalism, they're kind of dog shit. I got a yellow scoop from Bob the Builder. If you know, you know. I got a Barney like the size of a 2-year old at the time that was just in my room with those dead fucking eyes. And if you know Barney, Barney's a doll that comes to life. So when you get a kid a Barney doll, I think they're going to assume when the fuck is this motherfucker going to come to life? If you've seen the movie, there's a scene where the Barney doll's in the shower. Don't know why. And a kid is just slowly walking up to the shower. And Barney jumps out of the shower curtains. And you're like, son of a bitch, what is this big motherfucker doing here? Terrifying shit. Let's give it to a 2-year-old. But yeah, mom and dad split around, shit, I guess that was like pre 9/11. I was there. I'm young, but I was there. And moved back to Tennessee. Pretty sure he was born in Tennessee. Him and my grandmother moved to St. Louis. Grandmother stayed in St. Louis. Son went back to Tennessee with my older brother and raised my older brother single dad style. Got married, got divorced, I think got remarried, got divorced again. Don't know if he got remarried and got divorced again. Let me not cap on my pops, but had a girlfriend. She was really nice. And his ex wife is still a very nice woman. She sent me a congratulations card when I graduated high school. Didn't even have to do that, but she loved me. So it's always going to be good between us. But around 2020, around pandemic time, he moved back to St. Louis, next door to his mother. And well, I told you my grandmother, I have 3 grandmothers. So one grandmother ran the bar, and the other grandmother would keep us on the weekend while my parents would be at the bar with her. So just about every Friday and Saturday night for the first 18 years of my life, it was me, my little brother and sister, with Granny Hazel. And we'd order pizza sometimes, or she'd cook. We'd watch all the cable we could stomach. It was, looking back, one of the most, it was like home. I feel like growing up, I had multiple homes. And when I think of home, I think of her. So around 2019, 2020, biological father moves back. He'd always been pretty present in my life. Growing up, I'd spend like a week or two in Tennessee with him and got to see my older brother. It'd usually be like a family reunion situation, so I got to see all of my cousins on that side of the family. Just be a kid. I don't know how many hotel rooms a kid can stay in, but that was one of the times where I was like, ooh, we're in a hotel room. There's a pool. But Fast forward to when I'm about to go to DC. The week before, I started smoking weed around the age of 19. So I want to say late 2018. I think I was full fledged stoner by 2019. My biological father always smoked weed. And when he found out I smoked weed, we'd smoke weed together. His mom was pretty against smoking weed in general. She grew up in like the reefer madness era, war on drugs, all the things. But I think it brought us closer together. My dad was also a huge cinephile, loved movies. So I'd go visit my grandmother first, and then go next door, smoke weed, and watch movies with my dad. It was good. My dad was broke ish. I don't want to pocket watch the man, but I was usually smoking him out. So, 3 days before I leave for Washington, D.C., I was probably in between checks at the time, didn't grab my weed to go to D.C. yet. He smoked me out. And I was like, whoa, this guy like never smokes me out. Like, what the hell? I'll take it. I should still have a picture of that day. I had just shaven my head. Fun fact, I had the same haircut for the first 16 years of my life. Then junior year of high school, I just kind of said, fuck it, stopped getting my hair cut. Didn't really grow. Still don't really know how to take care of my hair. It kind of is what it is right now. This is like standard Nate. But yeah, I go to Washington D.C. and in the back of my mind, I always had this lingering feeling, knowing that two of my grandmothers were going through dementia and not really with us, like in the capacity that they used to be. There's a plane flying over us. Well, me. But I'm talking to you. So, us. And I always had this sinking feeling when I would think about that. Because up until that point in my life, I'd never really lost anybody in that way. I lost a few coworkers that I wasn't necessarily close to. And then an uncle during the pandemic, not due to COVID, but that was definitely a tough family loss. But up until that point, I'd never really lost like my person, my people. I'm gonna put a picture of my dad and grandmother in this video, but me and my two older brothers look like him. We get our face from him. And I don't even think 2 days into my trip to Washington, D.C., I get a call from my mom. And I'm like, we've already had the call of, hey, I made it in safe, safe travels, love you. So in the back of my mind, I was like, don't be my grandmother. Or this is my grandmother. And knowing it's my grandmother. And it was my dad. And that kind of put a damper on the trip. And I was like, should I go back? I just got here 2 days ago. Are arrangements being made? I've never lost anybody before. So I didn't really know what to do. My aunt lives in this 2-story house in this neighborhood in DC. And my cousin showed me that you could sit on the roof. I cried a lot on the roof. Just smoked weed and cried. I ended up staying the duration of the trip. But when I got back home, I connected with my 2 older brothers who I could have seen more. At that point, I was driving. I got my license at 19. Could have spent more time with them. Thankfully, still can, but it was hard for that reality to sink in. I can't look at them without seeing him, and I know they can't look at me without seeing him. I don't know why, but I think I was my dad's favorite. Let's say what you will, you're not supposed to have favorite kids. I think it's just human nature. I have favorite cousins. But I think he just really loved my mom and loved the person that my mom and stepdad made. And he felt like I didn't, or he didn't need to be around. He'd get me a pair of shoes and a Game Boy and did what he could. And this is what I hate. I hate the phone works both ways. I think it's the truth. I definitely think, at least in the people in my life, it's like, no, you could always call me, but you don't know what somebody's going through. And it's hard to really gauge that. When you feel like you don't have a place in somebody's life, who are you to call them for your sake? And I feel like that's how he thought he felt. Or I feel like that's what I thought. That was how he felt. That made sense. Fast forward a little bit to Christmas that year. My grandmother had just lost her son. She had just come over to my house because for a long time the grandmothers would individually host for the holidays. And my mom, dad, me, my little brother, and sister would make our rounds for the holidays. We do Thanksgiving in Atlanta with my dad's brother, and we'd have Christmas in St. Louis. And I don't even remember when we started, but we started doing Christmas. And everyone who entertained separately all entertained, well, all came to our house because we were entertaining, having people over, if you're not country like my dumbass. But I want to say 2 days after Christmas. My grandmother, my dad's mother, is in the hospital. She already opted to not resuscitate. My older brother, who had already been in town for our father's funeral, is on the phone because he can't make it from Tennessee to the hospital. My eldest brother, who stays not 15 minutes away from said hospital, didn't even know I was the one to call him. Flying down the street to grab him and come back. She was unconscious. She had taken a fall in her house, the place I had spent 18 years at up to this point, grieving the loss of a son. She passed that night. Our brother was on the phone and we were there, so I think she heard us, but I think because she heard us, she knew we were okay. Fast forward a bit, and now we're getting into, I guess, the beginning of what I can only describe as grief induced alcoholism or grief induced substance abuse. Whatever you want to call it, a nigga was grieving. My grandmother, who stayed with us during the pandemic, had been transferred to a assisted living facility or a senior home or an old folks home. I don't have all the details. A nigga was grieving. I just know it was hard to see her there, and it was hard to see her like that. But one of the places they were keeping her caught on fire, and it was the radiator in her room, and the fire had spread to her legs, and she was nonverbal at this point. So who knows how long she was sitting there in pain, on fire. Smoke alarms didn't go off. Thankfully, she was okay, but you could see the burns on her legs. And she passed soon after. Now, at this point, I had already lost the guy I got my face from, and one of the women who raised me. So now I lose another pillar in my life. The woman who surrounded me with so much love. I I had the freedom to be me and to pursue my interests and do what I wanted to do in my life at my limited capacity, being the child I was. And to see this badass I idolize and almost deified in such a manner, it was hard for me. Like I said, going through the thralls of substance abuse. This is where the story gets a little confusing because I don't exactly know if I'm mixing these two specifically up. But fast forward again to my mother receiving a call from essentially her stepmother that her father in Maryland is passing. And my mom's a cool lady. She makes one hell of a margarita and drinks Irish coffee in the morning. And I'll never forget, she told me about when she had first gone up there, or maybe in her room, or in his room, but she sees the same Irish coffee and the same tequila. And you can't tell me this shit's not genetic because I had only met that grandfather once before in my life, but he was still my grandfather. I went to the funeral, didn't really know the guy, so I felt more like I was going for my mom because somebody has to be there for my mom. I had already lost a father, so in some ways I felt like I could be there for her in ways somebody who hasn't lost a father could. And for the most part, the trip was fun. I didn't really spend time with my dad's side of the family, but rather his wife's side of the family and hearing stories about their family. Like my mom's mother, they grew up in a church and would do these pageants and musicals, and they were all very tight knit, getting into trouble, and just hearing their stories and being willing to take on a dead man's grandson who he hasn't seen since he was, I want to say, 8. I'm pretty sure the trip that I went to Obama's inauguration was the same trip where I had met my grandfather. So it was around that time. But there was a lot of love between them, all of them. And it was beautiful to witness. I didn't hear too many stories about my grandfather, but I know he was amongst good company. So, substance abuse, drinking, grieving. The following year, my stepdad's mother, whom had also played a major part in shaping the young man I am today, taught me how to read, funny enough. Wasn't doing much better. During all of this, we'd still have family gatherings and events, and you could see the progression from her driving to the event, to her husband driving to the event, to her needing a walker to get out of the car to the event, to us helping her out of the car onto the walker, to us helping her out of the car into a wheelchair. I remember one time we go to the house to help her get into bed, and she cried out. I don't remember how to read. And this is the woman who taught me how to read. I could only imagine a feeling of understanding something's not quite right, but not even having the ability to find out what it is or even do something about it. You might know exactly what it is, but it's the inability to be so close and yet so far. I remember it was her birthday, and we had her sisters come up from Alabama. Whole family was in the living room, and she was in her hospital bed, just laid up. You could just see her crying because everyone I love is in this room, and I just can't be there with them. But I'm here, but I'm not here. Not like I used to be. And she passed. And at this point, I felt like I was a pro. I felt like I knew exactly what I was doing. I felt like I've been through loss before. I had lost a parent before. I had lost two grandmothers before. I want to try to be there for my family while maintaining my sanity. But it wasn't easy. Loss is never easy. I think back to my mom's mom and me in this very house, in the room across the hall, waking up to the news that she had passed, and having the funeral home directors arrive to the house with my whole side of that family in the house, and my dad pulling me aside saying that, hey, none of us are strong enough to carry her out. I hate to ask you to do this, but could you carry her out? And without hesitation, I think of all the times she and everyone in that room had carried me. It was the absolute least I could do. So for him to lose his mom, I know it took a toll. We had two funeral services for Granny Williams. First one was in St. Louis, second one was in Alabama where she would be buried. And that second one was the hardest. I have a opinion on sunglasses. Sunglasses are a group decision. And if you are the only one wearing sunglasses, you're a dick. So all of you need to wear sunglasses. I told my siblings and my cousins to all bring a pair. And we all wore sunglasses to the funeral. Me, my elder brother, my older cousin, and a few of our uncles were the pallbearers. And this was the first funeral I had ever been a pallbearer. I hear that the affected family isn't supposed to carry their loved one, so up until that point, I had been on the receiving end of the tradition. But like I said before, for somebody that has carried me so many times, it was the very least I could do. And this was downhill, holding on as tight as I possibly could as we marched on. I think not even 6 months before that, as forementioned, I work at Top Golf and Main Event, both bars or restaurants, eating establishments, attractions, whatever you want to call it, in the Chesterfield area. And because I worked in Chesterfield for so long, I would frequent the bars in the area. At first, because I used to work out there, but soon after, just because these were bars I knew and felt comfortable in. Not even 6 months after, I got my first DUI. Now, I drank for the first time, I want to say at the age of 16 or 17. It had never been my thing. I think, given the family business, like I said, I'll put a picture of my grandmother's bar in the video. But I never really had any negative connotation to alcohol. I just knew it wasn't necessarily for me. It wasn't my jam. It wasn't my thing. I didn't get the appeal, especially after partaking. Started smoking at 19, and weed was everything. I love smoking weed. That's why this show's called the Hijinks Podcast. It's supposed to be funny. But as these losses kept happening in my life, I definitely grew a fondness and appreciation for alcohol. In some ways, I felt like it brought me closer to my family. But going through all of this, I definitely lost my way in terms of consumption and that wanting the pain to go away and wanting to do anything not to feel it. And yeah, I got my first DUI 2023 in May. I think I'm going to save that story for another time for the sake of time. But like all of my experiences in life, and for better or for worse, it didn't deter me. It didn't deter me in a way to where I was joking with friends about it and explicitly said, honestly, I'd do it again. And then I did it again. That first DUI, I totaled my car. And that second one, I just woke up in jail. Now, like I said, I had already been working at WashU at this point. Started in 2022, left in 2024. This was my second DUI. First one hadn't even been processed yet, but at this point, you're in repeat offender territory. Even though this was my first offense. But the second one, the one I don't remember, I got charged with resisting arrest. And knowing the type of person I am, I'm sure it was a well deserved charge, yeah. I didn't have any information on my court dates. And when I did, I had a warrant out for my arrest. So I ended up going a third time so that I could bond out. Once I bonded out, I had to wear an ankle monitor for a little over a year and a half. I actually just got it off of this year. And I don't know how many people in my life knew that. I know the people closest to me did. I know my family did. But even the listeners of this show, I don't know if they knew, honestly, any of this, but definitely like they had an ankle monitor on for a year and a half. And now there's a wasp on my camera. It flew off. I'm surprised they stayed long enough away for me to get this video off. Because there's definitely a wasp nest under this porch. But, yeah, this kind of brings us to present day, or at least to where I started dipping off into tangents. It's 2024. I'm at WashU. I have this ankle monitor on for at least 6 months at this point. I didn't want to work there. And with this ankle monitor on me, I didn't know where I was going to work. I had always been pretty politically minded. The school I went to, Lutheran North, was right up the street from the Ferguson uprisings. And funny enough, I don't even know if the events that unfolded there radicalized me. But this was right around the time of student protests for Israel and Palestine. And I agreed with the sentiments of the students and still do. There is a genocide going on in Gaza as we speak. But when the goal is for a university to divest their funding entirely from one of their highest funders, then I think we're fighting a losing battle. And I didn't go to the protests because of that. They weren't going to stop taking that money and still aren't. And the guest speaker at commencement, Jennifer Coolidge, who students were tweeting at, wasn't going to do shit about it either. Which got me really thinking, because at WashU I had a hell of a lot of time to read and to watch video essays on my phone. It was a very radicalizing time for me. And I was like, okay, what they're trying to do can't be done. What can we do? Ugh, there are bugs flying all over. But I was scrolling on Instagram one day and came across an ad for Action St. Louis's Black Organizing Summer School. Now, I've signed up to like courses and programs before, and I've paid out of my pocket upwards of $2,000 to either attend or get the course material. Not in like a get rich quick scheme type of way, but in like a this is what I want to do, this is where I think I'm going to go. I should divert all of my energy into this. And I've gone through fits and phases of that. Even recording this podcast was one of my passion projects at the time. But this program would pay you to receive the information. So I applied. I was just honest. I said what I wanted to say. I said what I cared about. I gave them my pure, unfiltered thoughts and thought nothing of it. This was nothing new for me in terms of trying to put myself out there in this manner, because I also signed up for like a coding boot camp around the same time. I was also trying to work at Procter and Gamble because I have family who works there. Great, great audio experience, I'm sure. But I got all the way to the final interview process at Procter and Gamble, the final interview, and didn't get the job. But the way Procter and Gamble hire is every 365 days, a year after you tried applying, you can apply again. So I was like, okay, I missed out. I'll try again next year, because this was the furthest I've gotten after applying to Procter and Gamble twice already before. Didn't really want to do that job, but the further I got into the interview process, the job was pretty sweet, at least for a young guy like me. I was like, okay, now that I know a lot more for this, this would be something that I could potentially do, at least until I fund this podcast or find something else I want to do. Not even 2 days later, I get an email back from Action St. Louis that I was accepted into the BOSS program. And that day, I quit my job at WashU. The BOSS program was awesome, truly. It was the first time in my life that I even considered myself being able to partake in a political space in this city. I grew up in St. Louis County, but in the St. Louis area. My grandmother's bar was in Baden. My grandmother lived right down the street from the old Wonder Bread factory. I grew up in Moline Acres, moved to U City, and moved back to Florissant. Worked in the St. Louis Zoo, worked in Chesterfield, worked in St. Charles, worked in St. Peter's, all over the area. But this was the first time I felt like this is what I want to do, and this is going to be how I learn to do it. From the Boss program, I got hired on as a temp for the Yes on 3 campaign to overturn the Missouri abortion ban. And I know I don't seem like the guy who's super passionate about women's rights. Maybe I do. But this is definitely like a human rights violation. And I think all of the work we do across the progressive movement space intersects. And an attack on one group's rights is an attack on all of us. So even if abortion wasn't my bread and butter, wasn't the thing that really brought me here, it was definitely something I was passionate about. And from there, I got hired at Action St. Louis. Since then, I've worked on local campaigns. I've worked on tornado relief. I've done trainings. I've done boot camps. I've met some of the most amazing people this city has to offer. And now I'm here. I know my word was fate, and I still don't know if I believe in it. But that's where I was at, and this is where I am now.